American Comics, My Warhammer Simulator Chapter 201-210. The lifespan of an Asgardian is around 5,000 years. Thor, the Thunder God, only 1,500 years old, is merely a young Asgardian warrior. Therefore, the vast majority of his treasure trove consists of spoils of war and battle-related collectibles. It basically encompasses the unique metallic materials and weapon styles of most races in the Nine Realms. Among them, what Rorschach was most interested in were the thousands upon thousands of Asgardian standard weapons forged from Uru metal. And a set of runes that young Thor used to learn to read and write. Even though Thor, reluctant to part with it, swore to use the Twilight Sword to exchange for this special item of greater commemorative significance. Rorschach, with a smile, still euphemism, declined Thor's proposal. Whether it's Asgard's technology or magic, both are based on the foundation of runes. Not to mention, these 24 runes were precious items personally crafted by the Allfather Odin. Even if Redditus couldn't research anything in the end, simply using them as a collection would also be a wonderful thing. In the following period, Iron Man David and Wang's task was to sort out the items by category and then pack them in huge iron boxes provided by Asgardian friendship. In the end, the weight of various items combined reached as high as 10 tons, and the iron boxes almost piled up into a small mountain. Wang had no choice but to directly return to Kamar Taj through the portal. Then, he pulled Mordo to reopen a teleportation channel directly to the secret base. Iron Man David summoned hundreds of automatic servo robots to quickly end this difficult transportation task. And Rorschach naturally knew when to stop. He didn't believe the Allfather's words that Asgard was willing to give everything. At the same time, Rorschach found Old John, who was recuperating from his injuries, and introduced him to the current Midgard, both directly and indirectly. Although Old John's performance on the previous battlefield was not as outstanding as Thor and Rorschach. However, this was because the comparison targets were different. An ordinary soldier of the Asgardian Legion can deal with 50 fully armed human warriors alone. Of course, this is under the condition that both sides are limited to the same weapons and equipment. However, the berserker Old John, relying only on his tattered armor and old weapons, fought against Asgardian soldiers 1 against 100. Even severely injured, he did not lose his life. What Rorschach valued was the other party's powerful skills in tempering his body and his rich experience in fighting for hundreds of years. Old John, who was covered in herbal bandages, didn't have much resistance to this. His second home, Alfheim, was in ruins. A berserker who only knows how to kill can't help much. And he, who still had hundreds of years to live, was unwilling to stay in Asgard for retirement. So, after thinking for a long time, he go-with-the-flow agreed to Rorschach's invitation to train human berserkers. However, Old John also clearly told Rorschach, the reason why Asgard cancelled the Berserker Legion's establishment was because the training difficulty and personnel loss were too terrifying. Moreover, once a new berserker steps onto the battlefield, he is often unable to control himself, and even teammates will suffer harm or even death. Only veterans like him who have experienced countless battles can freely control their minds. Rorschach had expected this. He bluntly said that Old John could let go and do it, and it didn't matter if he failed. Soon after, Rorschach, accompanied by Iron Man David, Wang, and Old John, prepared to return to Midgard. Thor came to see everyone off and gave Rorschach a farewell gift. It was a magical cloak made by Queen Frigga herself from white wolf skin. And its only function is to prevent any magical divination or tracking of the wearer of the white wolf cloak. Thor told Rorschach with a solemn expression. This is both his additional compensation to the Rorschach brothers, and Queen Frigga's personal thanks for Rorschach's help in Thor's return to Asgard. Rorschach, who had personally killed one of the other party's descendants, hesitated for a moment. In the end, he still accepted this special gift. A few seconds later, accompanied by twinkling sparks, the portal spanning countless light years appeared outside the base's tunnel entrance. Bearing the super phase sword on his back, and the recovered precision-engineered burst rifle hanging on his waist, Rorschach drove the Terminator armor with a broken Dow steel shell out of the portal. Subsequently, Iron Man David, holding the Infinity Gauntlet and the ice box and other precious items, and Old John, carrying simple luggage, also walked out. Wang, who was responsible for opening the portal, greeted everyone and then casually closed the portal. Rorschach didn't care much about this. Iron Man David recorded the other party's phone number. And Rorschach also found some magical artifacts and books suitable for mages from Thor's treasure trove and gave them to Wong. Now, although the relationship between the two sides can't be considered true good friends, it can be considered a general friend who can talk when something happens. Rorschach led Old John, who was constantly looking around, into the underground base. Iron Man David casually pointed at the surrounding automatic servo robots. Several automatic servo robots immediately stepped forward, took the heavy luggage from Old John's hand and the precious gains from Iron Man David's hand. Old John was slightly curious about the behavior of these robots. It wasn't that he hadn't seen mechanical civilizations in the universe. But in the past, both sides were fighting on the battlefield, and there were few opportunities to coexist so peacefully. Iron Man David arranged Old John's room opposite Bucky's. After it asked the other party if they had any other requirements, it slowly retreated from the room. At this time, Rorschach was already standing on the metal platform in the base's hall. A dozen automatic servo robots were busy around him, front and back. After half an hour, when all the armor parts were disassembled and transported to the underground for maintenance, Rorschach, with a hint of exhaustion finally appearing between his eyebrows, turned his head and said to Iron Man David, "Next time, if there is a long battle, I must bring a team of automatic servo robots. Otherwise, just not being able to lie down and rest after the battle will almost drive people crazy. My lord, although I still have many things to report to you, but I think it's better to wait until you rest before saying it. There are no major events that require your immediate attention." Iron Man David, with blue light flickering in his eye sockets, shook his metal head and said considerately, "David, then I won't be polite. You can go and rest too." Rorschach, blinking his eyes a few times, walked towards his own restroom. He simply rinsed his tall body, and before drying the water droplets all over his body, he lay down on the metal bed. As soon as Rorschach's eyelids closed, he immediately entered a state of sleep. About 15 hours later, Rorschach suddenly opened his eyes, awakened by the hunger in his stomach. He first stared blankly at the silver metal ceiling for a while. Then, Rorschach, slowly getting up, opened the simulator that he hadn't paid attention to for a long time, and extracted a bottle of Tig's beast milk from the food column. It's time to simulate. According to the simulation rule of one enhancement and one item at a time, this enhancement should be the Astartes surgery, right? I just don't know which Primarch I will meet this time. Loyalists or traitors? Rorschach, drinking the beast milk to fill his empty stomach, blinked his eyes a few times. He took a deep breath and, as usual, prayed to the Emperor. Then, a fingertip slid across the simulator's page and the simulation began. Open black lens bracket simulation starting, close black lens bracket open black lens bracket current possessed identity. Space Wolves Bloodclaw, subspace, webway, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket please select an arrival identity close black lens bracket open black lens bracket if refused, will arrive randomly close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket arrival identity selection refused close black lens bracket open black lens bracket simulation starting, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket you have arrived in the Warhammer universe close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket time, unknown close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket location. Galaxy Storm Nebula Kievar Planet Lycius Moon close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket you abruptly opened your eyes. Close black lens bracket open black lens bracket you found yourself falling from the sky once again. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket you did not utter a single cry of terror. Close black lens bracket open black lens bracket you merely gritted your teeth and used all your strength to try and adjust your landing posture. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket strands of biting cold wind brushed past your face, violently buffeting your gray hair. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket you suddenly realized that there were no lakes or rivers below to cushion your fall, only a continuous cluster of factory buildings. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket from those densely packed, towering factories, wisps of choking black smoke and drifting metallurgical ash constantly billowed. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket you are getting closer and closer to a metal factory building below. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Resigned, you closed your eyes and let out an angry roar. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You heavily crashed through the thick metal roof, landing headfirst in a pile of grain dozens of meters deep. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The granular grain, sliding like quicksand, quickly submerged your nostrils and mouth. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You struggled desperately, but sank deeper and deeper. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Just when you thought you were about to experience the unique death of suffocation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Accompanied by the loud sound of collapsing grain, you were carried out of the grain warehouse, where the food was stored, by a large amount of grain, and saw the light of day again. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You knelt on the uneven concrete ground, drenched in sweat, spitting out granular grain from your mouth and nose with great difficulty. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, one after another, human workers with bare, filthy chests, wearing only rough overalls, and clutching sledgehammers and pickaxes in their palms, gathered around. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. An upper-class artisan looking for a thrill? Or a spy and lackey of the tech guild? You heard a hesitant voice ask doubtfully. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Stop joking, comrade. Have you ever seen a naked spy? I think he's just a hiss. Why does this big guy have fangs? Look at his eyes. They look like beast eyes too. Could this be an experimental monster secretly created by the tech guild? Another loud, alarmed voice shouted. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were about to raise your head and explain your origins to the crowd, who were exclaiming in surprise. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The next moment, a sharp pickaxe cut through the air and smashed down heavily towards the top of your head. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your expression changed slightly, and your sharp-fingered hand quickly rose. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You snatched the pickaxe from the other person's hand, and as you quickly got up, your foot slammed into the attacker's abdomen. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Amidst the constant exclamations of the surrounding workers and the man's screams, a tall, middle-aged man immediately flew backwards, crashing into the crowd. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, just as you subconsciously gripped the pickaxe, wanting to escape this place first and find another opportunity to figure out the current situation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The corner of your eye seemed to catch sight of a huge figure, 3 meters tall, silently leaping down from the high point of a metal factory building. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your line of sight did not have time to capture the opponent's next course of action. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Even your field of vision lost any trace of the other person. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You instantly became alert. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The workers surrounding you folded their thick arms and revealed slightly mocking smiles as they watched you constantly scan your surroundings. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, a huge figure, 3 meters tall, suddenly emerged from the shadows of the factory building behind you, silently approaching your back. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The back of your neck suffered a vicious blow. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your vision suddenly went black, and you completely lost consciousness. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You fell into a state of unconsciousness. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You are not dead. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You gradually woke up from your unconscious state. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You looked around and found yourself in a small room filled with labor tools. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were firmly tied to a dilapidated metal chair. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Even if you struggled with all your might, you could hardly break free from the heavy restraints of the metal chains on your body. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In front of you, a black-haired man was squatting on the ground, holding a large iron bowl with a chipped edge, slurping up noodles. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At the same time, 2 sharp scythes, each about 1.5 meters long, and a heavy iron hammer were hanging from his waist, occasionally touching the ground as he ate. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Slurp. Grain is a rare and precious thing on this mining planet. Slurp. So, don't blame the workers for their attitude towards you. Especially in these critical times, they need to be extra careful. As if sensing your awakening, the black-haired man said without looking up. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You stared at the other person's huge size with great vigilance, remaining silent. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket until he completely ate the noodles in the large iron bowl, and then carefully placed it on the ground beside him. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Only then did the black-haired man slowly raise a fair-skinned, young face, staring straight at you with a pair of dark night-like pure eyes. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. How is father? How are the other brothers? I thought you would only come after this revolution was over. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You couldn't help but widen your blue wolf eyes, staring intently at the black-haired man in front of you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Corax, you stared at the other person's appearance with uncertainty. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Old Russ, little Corax, you can call me whatever you like, but I prefer them to call me comrade, so that we have no superior or inferior, no class distinctions. The 19th Primarch Corax said slowly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A refreshing, bright smile suddenly appeared on his fair skin, making you subconsciously blink your eyes, as if in the sunlight. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Respected comrade Corax, could you please release me? I was just confused about the situation just now. You calmed your excited mood and grinned. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Brother, what's your ranking? Maybe we met when we were young. Corax stared at you with a smile, but had no intention of getting up from the ground. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You narrowed your eyes slightly and let out a sigh. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You began to explain your identity and origins to the other person, as well as some thoughts about possibly being the 22nd Primarch. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. But you also hid any information about the Emperor and the future of the human empire, as well as anything about chaos. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A brother who can travel through time and space. Corax, with a slightly furrowed brow, subconsciously rubbed his fair chin and muttered to himself. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Just when you thought the other person would pause for a moment to ponder and digest the complex information, Corax, who was squatting on the ground, suddenly stood up and stepped forward. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Before you could see the other person's footsteps clearly, the sharp side that was originally hanging on Corax's waist whistled and fell towards your face. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The next second, the metal chains that were tightly wrapped around your bare body crashed to the ground, making a rattling sound. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Come, strange brother, I'll treat you to noodles. But before that, I need to find you some clothes to wear. It's easy to cause a stir among the mining planet girls if you're always running around naked. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Corax blinked his pure eyes, gave you a bright smile, and said softly, close black lens bracket. You followed Corax out of the small storage room. You received a clean linen vest with a faint fragrance and a set of work overalls that were not too worn. You also received a pair of round-toed work boots with heavy steel plates covering the toe area. Your sturdy, 2-meter-tall body was clad in all the clothes, barely resembling an ordinary mine worker. Corax suggested that you shave your entire head bald, making you look even more like a laborer. You glanced at his shoulder-length hair and resolutely rejected Corax's suggestion. Corax, looking regretful, had no choice but to put away his sharp scythe. He led you into a large smelting plant that constantly emitted choking black smoke and smelting ash. A wave of scorching heat immediately rushed towards you. At the same time, old mine carts carrying large amounts of ore slowly climbed up from the underground mine along the tracks laid on the ground. Next to those simple, rudimentary smelting furnaces, many thin, young children with seemingly congenital disabilities helped their parents or elders to constantly move the heavy ore from the mine carts. Their prematurely mature and determined little faces were covered with traces of sweat constantly flowing down due to the high temperature and fatigue. Lisa is a mining star, and also a satellite of the industrial world of Kievar. This used to be a prison where they exiled slaves and criminals, until the greedy tech guild on Kievar accidentally discovered amazing mineral reserves. Since then, the descendants of these slaves and criminals have had to endure even more suffering. Korax, his long black hair swaying slightly, said to you without turning his head. In the next moment, his large figure disappeared from your sight in the blink of an eye, appearing next to the laborers. He either listened to their complaints, then asked a few questions and chatted, or casually helped them lift a cart of heavy ore weighing over 1,000 pounds. Occasionally, Korax would pat the little head of an obedient child, like a tireless human gyroscope, moving back and forth within your field of vision. For the first time, you clearly felt the gap between you and the true Primarch. It was not just a simple comparison of size and strength, but a spiritual will and unparalleled personal charisma that permeated the depths of the soul. Almost every laborer and child with smelting ash on their faces would subconsciously show a sincere smile to Korax from the bottom of their hearts. And Korax was willing to help them, understand them, and listen to their simple requests and clumsy words. No matter how many workers were around, Korax would patiently show the same bright smile to each laborer, carefully listening to their grievances. After a group of energetic laborers dispersed and returned to their extremely difficult and dangerous jobs, Korax, with a calm expression, returned to your side. You couldn't help but blink your eyes and followed him forward. Korax led you gradually out of the area belonging to the smelting plant. You entered a low-lying shantytown area. Simple but neatly designed metal prefab houses appeared one by one before your eyes. At this moment, countless nimble and agile women walked out of the metal prefab houses. Their rough-skinned hands carried amazing amounts of grain flour or unknown plants collected from the wild, heading towards the center of the shantytown area. You also noticed, unexpectedly, that against the backdrop of an overly bright sky, a tall black spire seemed to be an eye-catching building adorning the shantytown area. You followed Korax behind this large group of women. As the countless people slowly moved, large, bustling stoves gradually appeared in front of the large group. More strong women, along with children or male workers with physical disabilities, were constantly preparing batches of steaming food. Korax, constantly greeting the surrounding laborers, led you through the large crowd handing over grain. You came to a large stove that was cooking noodles. Nia, 2 extra large bowls of laborers' noodles, and remember to add extra spicy moss to one of them. The spiciness you've been making lately isn't spicy enough, Korax said with a smile to a young girl named Nia. Korax, are you a Grok's spawn? Didn't you just finish your portion? The young girl frowned slightly, raised her tanned and sturdy arm, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and widened her eyes. Korax didn't say anything, he just raised his hand and pointed to you standing beside him. The young girl blinked her bright eyes slightly. She stared at you, who was obviously different in appearance and spirit, and nodded knowingly. You and Korax received a large bowl of steaming laborers' noodles. You learned from Korax and squatted on the ground, intending to eat. At this moment, accompanied by bursts of sharp buzzing sounds from the direction of the black spire, the surrounding overly bright sky suddenly gradually dimmed, revealing patches of dark night sky dotted with countless stars. Before you could feel confused and ask, Korax, who was slurping noodles, explained to you that the satellite of Lisa has no atmosphere. The reason why humans can survive is entirely due to a special protective force field of the Tech Guild, which is also one of their most precious technological creations. You nodded slightly, just about to lower your head to eat. In the next moment, accompanied by a large group of laborers returning from the smelting plant and underground mine, the scene near the large stove suddenly became lively. You saw the tired-looking laborers carefully take out carefully polished metal parts from their work overalls and hand them to a team of workers who seemed to move silently and were taller and stronger. As countless metal parts gradually gathered together, simple but heavy firearms capable of firing solid ammunition were assembled one by one in the hands of the laborers, and quickly loaded into inconspicuous wooden boxes, withdrawing from the location of the large stove. Comrade King, according to the report from Comrade Castle, the number of basic firearms has accumulated to 10,000, but the overall amount of ammunition is not enough to support large-scale combat. A young girl named Nia walked up to you and Korax, and said in a low voice without hesitation to Korax, who was drinking noodle soup. Your whole body immediately gathered its spirits, temporarily losing the desire to eat. Comrade, Queen, please notify Comrade, Castle, that the number of basic firearms is sufficient. Immediately disperse and store them to prevent them from being wiped out in one fell swoop. Also, let him speed up the repair of the large equipment, the stone digger, and take stock of the reserves of laser cutters. Finally, please also notify Comrades, Bishop, and Knight, that the task of secretly monitoring the overseers cannot be slackened in the slightest. We need to firmly grasp their every move. Korax, with a calm expression, succinctly and powerfully conveyed tasks and orders to Nia. At this moment, the leadership temperament he subconsciously exuded made you unforgettable. Soon after, Comrade Nia, codenamed Queen, nodded slightly, remembering all of Korax's orders. She seemed to smile at you, who was listening, and then quickly turned and left your presence. Comrade Korax, what can I do? You turned to stare at Korax, who had put down the large iron bowl, and asked in a deep voice. Brother, your arrival is just in time. After several riots and strikes, although we have secretly obtained many supplies and training time, the attacking power of the entire revolutionary force is still insufficient, and even the commanding personnel who can stand alone are quite lacking. When equipment and experience are not enough to support us, we can only fill the fatal gaps that appear during combat with the lives of countless comrades. Korax, whose expression gradually became more solemn, blinked his deep eyes at you. You held the gradually cooling laborer's noodles in your palm, your whole body squatting on the ground without moving. See that black spire? One of our goals is to light up that spire. This is the prologue to the entire revolution, and it is also sending a signal of uprising to the laborers on the entire satellite. Originally, I should personally lead the team to the black spire to fire the first shot, but in that case, the difficult task of seizing the enemy's landing points, those gravity wells, would be prolonged by a lot of time, and greatly increase the uncertainty of the entire battle. I trust the Shadow Special Forces that I personally trained very much, but I don't believe in the possibility of the mission succeeding by luck. Korax's deep eyes stared straight at you, slowly telling you part of the plan. Brother, are you willing to make outstanding contributions to liberate the suffering people on this satellite? He asked you with a solemn expression. That's why I'm here. You nodded heavily to Korax without hesitation. In the next second, Korax, whose fair face showed a bright smile again, suddenly raised a muscular and sturdy arm and gently patted you on the shoulder. Brother, welcome to join our revolutionary ranks. Your laborers' noodles are getting cold, don't waste food. You couldn't help but grin and smile. You held the large iron bowl and slurped down the thick noodles that still tasted delicious. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. In the first week, you followed Korax to meet Comrade Aroni, the Forge supervisor codenamed Castle, and the Neff brothers, commanders of the Shadow Squad codenamed Knight and Bishop. Additionally, Comrade Arlen, codenamed Pawn, turned out to be the robust man you had a physical altercation with upon your arrival here. Under Korax's kind gaze, you personally apologized to him. Arlen accepted your apology with an awkward expression. At the same time, he also indicated to you that the fault for the incident actually lay with him. As a communications liaison for numerous workers' resistance organizations, his failure to resolve the conflict was a dereliction of duty. You successfully resolved your only conflict with Arlen. You listened to everyone's advice and chose Foreman as your revolutionary codename. Korax began assigning tasks to everyone. You need to lead 3 shadow squads to the Black Spire to light the first match that will ignite a revolutionary storm sweeping across the entire satellite. Korax will personally lead the elder of the Neff brothers and 15 shadow squads, who have undergone rigorous training, to seize the 10 gravity wells that are heavily guarded by overseers and sentries, the only place where the enemy can quickly enter the interior through the protective field covering the entire satellite. Subsequently, the younger of the Neff brothers will lead a large number of armed workers to occupy many strategic locations, such as enemy supply lines or armories. Arlen is responsible for contacting some of the scattered worker resistance organizations on the planet's surface to try to launch an uprising, buying more time for the revolution to succeed, while Nia and Aroni are responsible for directing countless ordinary workers, women, and children to carry out logistical support work. Comrades, the success or failure of the revolution hinges on this. We must firmly remember the many sufferings we have endured in the past, deeply understand the desires and wishes of the vast proletariat. We must always remember that a single spark can start a prairie fire. Korax, who is 3 meters tall, said to everyone with a solemn expression. A single spark can start a prairie fire. You and the others clenched your fists and shouted loudly. In the second week, you were granted command of 3 shadow squads, an elite force consisting of 27 people in total, divided into groups of 3, with every 3 groups forming a complete shadow squad. As worker elites, they are all proficient in using firearms and melee weapons, and can perform silent ambushes and stealth even while wearing heavy metal armor. You also received guerrilla warfare tactics taught by Korax, which can be summarized in just 16 characters. The enemy advances, we retreat; the enemy camps, we harass; the enemy tires, we strike; the enemy retreats, we pursue. You obtained a set of crudely designed metal armor from the forge supervisor, Aroni. This protective armor, which does not even have basic driving capabilities, can only resist scattered stray bullets and explosive shrapnel, and cannot directly face the enemy's laser weapons and heavy firepower. Even so, this is the protective armor forged by Korax and countless workers through the wisdom and struggle of the masses, with the heroic sacrifice of countless workers' lives. Only the most elite shadow squads are uniformly equipped, while ordinary revolutionary soldiers only have cumbersome firearms and melee weapons. You also obtained a homemade shotgun suitable for close combat, and 2 double-edged axes carefully crafted from minecart wheel hubs. You led the 3 shadow squads in the smelting factory to conduct pre-battle training with Korax. Your goal was to engage in a series of guerrilla battles with Korax, quickly improving the integration and combat capabilities between you and the squads through a near-real combat environment. After 22 simulated battles, you barely managed to secure a counterattack opportunity for the surviving shadow squads through a radical sacrifice of yourself, successfully knocking away the sharp scythe in Korax's hand. However, you were also hammered into a small shadow by the heavy iron hammer in Korax's other hand. After the last simulated battle ended, Korax, who had started eating noodles again, expressed his appreciation and affirmation of your rapidly improving guerrilla warfare skills. Brother, I've discovered that your combat instinct far exceeds your combat awareness. Sometimes, choosing to trust your body's judgment may bring you unexpected surprises, Korax said slowly to you, taking a sip of the spicy noodle soup. You took a deep breath and fell into thought, carrying the 2 double-edged axes. In the 3rd week, the day of redemption is at hand, and the revolutionary spark sweeping across the entire satellite and industrial world is about to launch its first prairie fire action. You and the 27 elite workers of the shadow squads finished the noodles sent by the logistics personnel and began to silently and orderly put on the heavy metal armor. You relied on your strong physical fitness and strength to carry up to 3 times the amount of shotgun ammunition. One shadow squad even specially carried a laser cutter. You gripped the 2 double-edged axes tightly and led the shadow squads out of the hidden smelting factory. At this moment, one by one, the armed workers holding cumbersome firearms and fully armed silently paid attention to you, silently praying for your actions. Just ahead of you, Korax, who had already put on a set of jet black armor on his massive figure, stood in place holding 2 giant claws, Yu Kanshu. He also had a sharp scythe and a heavy iron hammer hanging from his waist. At the same time, one by one, the elite workers also wearing heavy armor silently followed behind Korax. Their tall figures carrying cumbersome firearms cast large patches of jet black shadows on the ground. You and Korax exchanged a silent glance, and then nodded heavily. These 2 combat teams, different in number but with the same goal, slowly brushed past each other, heading to the battlefield in their respective directions. You quickly led the 3 shadow squads to quietly lurk on the periphery of the Black Spire, waiting for the right opportunity. Accompanied by bursts of sharp buzzing from inside the Black Spire, the entire satellite seemed to enter a nighttime state from daytime, with countless stars adorning the icy universe. A large number of overseer guards stationed below the Black Spire relaxed their vigilance and began to walk towards their cafeteria in groups of 2s and 3s. You gestured to the worker warriors of the shadow squads to infiltrate and kill. 9 elite workers immediately emerged from the shadows of the buildings where they were hiding, and then quietly entered the enemy's front line. The first Shadow Squad's mission was to eliminate the enemy's exposed firepower points and control the opponent's heavy weapons to launch fire cover. You stared expressionlessly at the melee weapons painted black, forcefully stabbing them into the bodies of the sentries who had no time to issue any warnings. You subconsciously took a deep breath, your palms tightly gripping the cold, rough surface of the double-edged axes. Comrades, for the victory of the revolution, follow me. Charge! You, codenamed Foreman, shouted in a low voice. Clad in heavy metal armor, the tall figure moved silently and swiftly towards the enemy encampment beneath the black spire. Simultaneously, a series of hybrid heavy artillery turrets, firing both physical projectiles and scorching lasers, erupted with terrifying roars under the control of the Shadow Task Force. A large number of unsuspecting enemy troops were caught completely off guard by the attack. Countless guards, unable to find cover in time, were torn apart and incinerated by the sweeping crossfire. In the chaos, their panicked cries filled the air as they failed to mount any organized defense or counterattack. Only a few trails of electromagnetic weaponry occasionally streaked across the dark night sky, but they had little effect. You launched a swift and fierce charge towards the encampment ahead. In one hand, you wielded a double-bladed battle-axe, while the other suddenly raised a bulky, homemade shotgun. You brutally knocked aside an unfortunate enemy soldier who ran in front of you, his scream attracting the attention of some of the enemy. With a deafening and piercing roar, a large number of metal pellets, meticulously crafted by the laboring workers, spewed forth from the crude muzzle. Guards who had just turned their weapons to fire at you were instantly riddled with holes, the closest one having his entire chest blasted into a gaping cavity. Without hesitation, you swung the double-bladed battle-axe, cleaving through the lightly wounded enemies. Just then, two members of the Shadow Task Force sped past you, silently launching an assault on the entrance of the Black Spire. You began to scan the enemy ranks, searching for commanding officers. You spotted an enemy who seemed different from the others in terms of attire and demeanor. He was angrily shouting at the guards who had barely managed to form a scattered line, seemingly trying to get his men to cross the intense barrage of fire and operate vehicles for a counterattack. You immediately changed direction. The homemade shotgun in your grip swung in a wide arc with the movement of your thick arm, loading the next shell. Instantly, scorching lasers and electromagnetically propelled projectiles from the enemy whizzed past you, leaving terrifying marks on your heavy metal armor. You began to run in a zigzag pattern. The lack of power armor's powerful protection actually awakened your animal instincts. You seemed to be able to predict the trajectory changes of most of the enemy's projectiles. You no longer needed to consciously control your evasive maneuvers during the charge, your agile, towering body automatically performed the necessary dodges. You couldn't help but reveal a cruel grin. You forcefully swung the double-bladed battle-axe, now covered in blood and gore, continuously hacking down the enemies who stood in your path. You quickly approached the commanding officer who was trying to hide behind his troops and constantly retreating. You even saw his eyes widen and his face contort in utter despair. Without expression, you raised the homemade shotgun in your hand. However, the countless metal pellets that erupted forth were completely blocked by a faintly pulsating azure arc. The commanding officer possessed a powerful personal protective device. Just as a relieved smile appeared on the commander's face, and he attempted to turn and flee. You stepped forward once more, violently raising the double-bladed battle-axe, embedding most of the axe head deep into his skull. You casually pulled the brain-splattered double-bladed battle-axe out and flicked it slightly. Without hesitation, you discarded the homemade shotgun and the large amount of spare ammunition you carried at your waist. You picked up another double-bladed battle-axe that had been strapped to your back. You twisted your neck from side to side. You quickly swung the two double-bladed battle axes, charging towards the reassembling enemy ranks. At the same moment, the two members of the Shadow Task Force, using laser cutters that repeatedly spat out high-temperature sparks, successfully breached the entrance of the Black Spire. Like heavily armored ghosts, they silently entered the Black Spire. However, even the well-trained Shadow Task Force could not overcome the difference in weaponry. They paid the price of 2 squads worth of casualties to successfully kill the guard commander inside the Black Spire and scatter his troops. Soon after, the Shadow Task Force members who had occupied the heavy artillery turrets left one squad to continue operating them, while the remaining members followed your charge, continuously roaming and eliminating enemies on the battlefield of the encampment. Until the viscous blood almost completely splattered your heavy metal armor, soaking your linen undershirt and overalls. Almost all of the enemy guards in the entire encampment had been slaughtered. You quickly led the Shadow Task Force members beside you towards the Black Spire. You were surprised to discover that the entire interior of the Black Spire had long been abandoned, only the lowest level and the basement were within the activity range of the encampment guards. You directed the remaining Shadow Task Force members to eliminate the remaining enemies inside the Black Spire. You quickly ran towards the top level of the Black Spire. Along the way, you constantly examined the mechanical creations covered in thick dust, hoping to find technological devices that could restart the Black Spire. However, even after reaching the top platform of the Black Spire, you did not find any mechanical creations that could successfully ignite the Black Spire. You took a deep breath of the frigid air and couldn't help but narrow your blue wolf eyes. Time was running out. Both Korax and the countless armed workers were waiting for the signal of the uprising that you would send. After a moment of contemplation, you immediately turned and ran back down the Black Spire. You found the Shadow Task Force members who were collecting enemy weapons and equipment, instructing them to dismantle the energy engines of large vehicles as much as possible and collect all the liquid fuel tanks in the encampment. You hoisted the laser cutter, weighing several hundred kilograms, onto your shoulder and rushed back to the top platform of the Black Spire without looking back. Approximately 15 minutes later, all of the Shadow Task Force members had arrived at the Spire platform. At the same time, one can after another of pungent liquid fuel flowed freely down the towering Black Spire. You piled several energy engines and the nozzles of the laser cutters together, leaving a trail to ignite the liquid fuel. You waved your hand, signaling everyone to immediately evacuate the Black Spire. A few minutes later, you unhesitatingly pressed the start switch of the laser cutter, and a large amount of high-temperature sparks continuously splashed onto the metal casing of the energy engines. You, like a beast with its tail on fire, ran towards the platform's staircase without looking back. Boom! Along with a deafening roar, a column of explosive fire that soared into the sky almost illuminated a large area near the Black Spire. At the same time, countless liquid fuels that flowed freely on the outside of the Black Spire were instantly ignited, and the expanding and burning flames almost completely enveloped the upper half of the Black Spire, forming an extremely conspicuous supersized torch. This uprising revolution belonging to the workers of the Mining Star had finally begun its prologue. Even if your desperate escape wasn't too slow, you were still scorched by the high temperature from the exploding firelight, and even your heavy metal armor didn't provide much protection, even becoming an accomplice in worsening your injuries. Due to this being a descent, your special physique will come into play, making you not too concerned about non-lethal injuries. However, your head of gray hair suffered irreparable damage, scorched by the burning flames into a pitted and miserable state. You had to have a member of the Shadow Strike team, wielding a narrow blade, carefully shave off all of your hair. You, now bald, didn't have time to lament. You immediately directed everyone to collect all usable weapons, equipment, and ammunition, and began moving them to a large vehicle that had been left behind beforehand. According to Korax's plan, after completing the operation to capture the Black Spire, your first mission would be successfully completed. You could choose to occupy a base, or go and direct more armed workers to cut off the enemy's supply lines. You decided to adopt a guerrilla warfare style, using the mobility of the large vehicle to carry out a series of raids against enemy strongholds. Accompanied by the sound of an energy engine starting, a Shadow Strike team member, who had set up a heavy firepower turret, tapped the vehicle's metal hull, indicating that they were ready. You and the others rode in this powerful large vehicle, speeding along the uneven and rugged road. You quickly passed the first group of armed workers who were operating large stone-cutting machines, severing the enemy's underground communication and supply pipelines. Your first victory greatly boosted the confidence and joy of the armed workers, who waved their hands at you, even increasing the speed of operating the stone-cutting machines. You couldn't help but narrow your cyan wolf eyes, revealing a faint smile. However, as you passed the second group of uprising armed workers, they were suffering significant losses while attacking an enemy stronghold. You immediately directed the driver of the large vehicle to forcefully charge into the enemy's stronghold. The heavy firepower turrets, erupting violently in all directions, immediately disrupted the enemy's defensive deployment. At the same time, you, wielding two double-bladed great axes, also jumped out of the large vehicle, cutting a bloody path while successfully beheading the enemy's commander. Subsequently, after returning to the large vehicle, you directed the driver to rush out of the stronghold. Behind you, the excited roars and fierce cries of countless armed workers seemed to reverberate through the sky. Until all the ammunition in the large vehicle was completely exhausted, your raid tactics had helped the armed workers capture 13 large strongholds and 10 small and medium-sized strongholds. Just as you were planning to find an enemy stronghold to replenish some ammunition and supplies, you unexpectedly heard broadcast information from other Shadow Strike teams. It was a public communication notifying more armed worker teams to come and take over the occupied areas. You looked down at the vehicle-mounted map in the large vehicle and discovered that you had actually arrived near a gravity well that Korax was fiercely attacking. At this moment, Korax and the Shadow Strike team he led, who had already captured several gravity wells, had not suffered too many casualties. After obtaining more enemy weapons and ammunition, the team's offensive momentum became even more rapid and terrifying. You tidied up your equipment and led the remaining Shadow Strike team to join the battle to attack the gravity well. You also witnessed for the first time just how terrifying a Primarch fighting with only their physical body could be. The enemy's naked eye couldn't capture Korax's charging direction at all, and even heavy firepower weapons couldn't keep up with his speed of advance. In an instant, countless enemy corpses or pieces of flesh, completely blown away by the Primarch's terrifying brute force, scattered across the entire battlefield like dense raindrops. Even the metal armor of small and medium-sized vehicles was torn open with hideous cracks by the huge claws in Korax's hands, crushing the enemies hiding inside. At the same time, elite Shadow Strike team members, seemingly dancing between the shadows, appeared unpredictably in any corner of the battlefield, either assassinating enemy commanders or destroying enemy heavy firepower. You blinked your cyan wolf eyes. You wielded 2 double-bladed great axes, leading your Shadow Strike team to join the battle. Soon after, Korax, whose heavy metal armor was soaked with countless bloodstains, quietly arrived beside you, shaking his towering 3-meter-tall figure. You casually killed an enemy who tried to pull the pin on a fragmentation grenade and blow himself up, and smoothly snatched the fragmentation grenade from the palm of his hand, hanging it on your waist. Brother, come with me. The enemies around this gravity well are not quite right. Their defensive forces are transferring to an underground base. There must be large weapons stored down there that we haven't scouted. Korax said to you concisely with a solemn expression. You nodded heavily and immediately followed Korax, who had deliberately slowed down his charging speed, with 2 double-bladed great axes in hand. In the next moment, Korax, whose black hair exuded an endless bloody aura, quickly stirred up terrifying claw storms, and those enemies who stood in his path would be completely shredded and turned into flying flesh. You would occasionally wield 2 double-bladed great axes, beheading some lucky ones who had managed to dodge Korax's huge claws. As time passed, the two of you actually arrived at the only entrance before the large defensive forces entered the underground base. Streams of scorching lasers and electromagnetic projectiles, accompanied by a large number of solid bullets, covered your direction. You could only rely on the heavy cover and vehicles near the underground entrance to evade the crossfire of the heavy firepower turrets. Korax, on the other hand, relied on his incomparably powerful physical strength and almost unparalleled stealth speed to eliminate the enemy's firepower positions one by one. Subsequently, with an angry roar, you suddenly jumped out of the heavy cover, wielding 2 double-bladed great axes to launch a brutal counterattack against the enemy. 15 minutes later, you, whose bald head was almost covered with viscous blood, stood beside Korax, holding 2 double-bladed great axes with shattered blades. Come on, brother, let's see what's hidden underground. Korax, blinking his deep eyes, seemed to glance at your bald head, and grinned. You and Korax cautiously entered the dimly lit underground base. You quickly crossed a spiral staircase covered with thick dust and fresh footprints, entering a wide passage. You unexpectedly saw a black-framed, yellow background radiation warning sign on the rusty, blackened metal wall. Korax also noticed your discovery. You and Korax exchanged glances and nodded slightly. Korax, his long black hair swaying slightly, moved silently, completely merging into the shadows like a true ghost, and quickly infiltrated the depths of the passage. Dozens of seconds later, a series of crisp sounds of human bodies being torn apart and extremely tragic death howls were constantly heard, and then disappeared completely. You, holding 2 double-edged axes with broken blades, stepped into the depths of the passage, your feet treading on the thick mud mixed with a large amount of blood and dust. You passed countless incomplete human remains and arrived beside Korax, who had just killed hundreds of enemies. Right in front of you, a metal gate several feet thick stood tall, and cracking devices connected to the electronic interface of the gate were constantly running, occasionally emitting bursts of low hums. This seems to be a warehouse, and its existence may be very long, possibly dating back to the early days of the Mining Stars establishment. I estimate that these guards just discovered this place, otherwise, they wouldn't even have entry permission. Korax, blinking his deep eyes, repeatedly scanned the surrounding environment and turned to say to you. Guess what's inside? What could make a group of guards facing an attack so concerned? Biochemical weapons. Or, you narrowed your eyes slightly, obviously remembering the warning sign you had seen before. We'll know when we open it. A faint smile appeared on Korax's fair face. He put away the huge claws he was wearing on his hands, glanced around at the enemy's cracking devices, and then squatted down. Lines of data code, like heavenly scriptures, continuously jumped out from his dancing fingertips. You stared at the back of Korax's huge body, and couldn't help but blink. You awkwardly put down the double-edged axe you had just raised. Soon after, accompanied by a series of raw and ear-piercing sounds of mechanical valves turning, the metal gate in front of you slowly opened. In the next moment, the power generation device inside the warehouse seemed to receive a response. After the internal and external air pressure was completely balanced, faint light sources with yellowish light gradually illuminated everything inside. In an instant, both you and Korax couldn't help but widen your eyes. Atomic mining bombs, also known as nuclear bombs. You seemed to hear Korax's subconscious murmur. At this moment, on the empty ground of the warehouse, atomic mining bombs covered in a layer of transparent film were neatly placed in front of you. They seemed to have grown swaying invisible little hands, tightly enticing your immovable gaze. Your expression numb, you stared at the atomic mining bombs, which may have numbered over 1,000, and couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva and gasp for air. Brother, immediately notify the entire Shadow Strike team. Notify all armed worker units in the vicinity. Even if most of our comrades have to die here, we must firmly guard these things. Korax, his deep eyes widened, shook his head and shouted to you with a solemn expression. You nodded emphatically, and then ran towards the ground above without hesitation. Of course, you understood how much the entire revolutionary team would reduce the loss of combat personnel and increase the morale of the battle after possessing such a large number of powerful weapons. This was almost a victory bargaining chip that could not be measured by the value of life. You gritted your teeth and waved the broken double-edged axe, forcibly rushing out of the underground base and joining the chaotic battlefield that was raging. Soon after, you, covered in blood, led the Shadow Strike team, which had completed the Gravity Well occupation mission, into the underground base. After meeting with Korax, the elites of the Shadow Strike team quickly took over the defense of the base. You returned to the ground and found your large vehicle. The revolutionary teams of armed workers also received your broadcast, and the teams that came to reinforce the area almost immediately made the garrison near the Gravity Well crowded. At the same time, Comrade Nia, the logistics supervisor codenamed Queen, and Comrade Aroni, the forging supervisor codenamed Castle, also quickly arrived here and took over the command authority from you and Korax. Subsequently, you and Korax immediately led teams of armed workers who had replaced their weapons and equipment, as well as a small number of Shadow Strike teams responsible for infiltration and beheading, to launch a revolt to liberate the entire mining star. In the fourth week, this mining star named Laceus completely became a revolutionary area under your control. As the news of your continuous victories spread, countless armed workers who had been oppressed for hundreds of years rose up in rebellion. Relying on their crude weapons and fearless spirit, they killed the overseers who were helping the evildoers, and even flattened most of the guard outposts. As revolutionary leaders, you and Korax were strongly sought after and welcomed by a large number of armed workers wherever you went. You seemed to feel the love and worship of the people clearly for the first time. Even your completely damaged double-edged axe was repolished and reinforced by some workers proficient in forging technology and personally delivered to you. However, just as you were gradually becoming complacent, Korax, who had only completed the first step of the revolution, was not obsessed with the temporary victory in front of him. Under the other party's earnest teachings, you gradually regained your original intention of joining the revolutionary team. As strands of false vanity gradually peeled away from the depths of your heart, you subconsciously broke out in a cold sweat. You took a deep breath, silently prayed a few words to the Emperor who was still alive, and then tightly grasped the brand new double-edged axe. With the takeover and reorganization of more armed worker teams, you and Korax quickly returned to the location of the gravity well. Through exploration and investigation, you re-strengthened the protection intensity of the special force field covering the entire planet, preventing surprise attacks from enemies on the planet. In the 5th week, just as you were stepping up the training of the revolutionary team to prepare for the next war, the tech guild and slave owners entrenched on the planet Kievar seemed to finally react. They learned about the uprising on the mining star through their own means. The superiors, who were dependent on the minerals produced by the mining star and needed to maintain their economy and smooth over their injured self-esteem, immediately sent a large pacification army to the mining star without hesitation. Giant ships with protective capabilities far exceeding the current Imperial level stopped at the location of the gravity well, which was the only way to enter the interior of the mining star, and then landing pods carrying a large number of mortal soldiers launched an attack on the ground. However, Korax, who had been prepared for this, led you and other armed worker teams to make a preemptive tactical plan to encircle the point and strike at reinforcements. You first pretended to abandon the garrison around the gravity well, fooled the other party's reconnaissance system, and then arranged a dense network of firepower turrets around the flat terrain of the gravity well. A large number of ambush teams also carried out ambush missions by digging underground tunnels. Soon after, when the first batch of landing forces carrying mortal soldiers continuously descended towards the mining star through the gravity well without any defensive measures, Yu Kanshu, a large number of rock-breaking machines broke through the surface and became metal walls blocking the enemy's powerful firepower. At the same time, hybrid firepower turrets, emitting violent roars, constantly prepared to destroy landing pods that had not yet landed. Countless mortal soldiers who did not have time to escape instantly became burning fireballs blooming in midair. Wielding the double-edged axe, wearing heavy metal armor, you led teams of well-trained armed workers, rushed out of the underground, and launched a terrifying, tidal-like assault on the mortal soldiers who had managed to land. Every armed worker following behind you was full of morale. Whether it was for the future of their children and grandchildren or for their own safety, they had no fear or awe even in the face of mortal soldiers with better weapons and equipment, only a fighting will that disregarded life and death. As the spearhead of the entire assault team, you inserted yourself into the enemy's ranks like a sharp knife, chopping down any enemy. 8 hours later, when the enemy's last landing pod was accurately destroyed by the constantly roaring firepower turrets, this counterattack war belonging to the enemy completely became a hellish joke circulating in the revolutionary team. You held 2 double-edged axes with slightly curled blades in your palm and stood on top of a damaged landing pod. You raised your head and stared at the huge ships that were gradually withdrawing outside the special force field. A faint smile appeared on your face, which was full of fatigue and sweat. You lowered your head slightly and saw countless armed worker teams raising their hands and cheering, slowly walking towards you, escorting Korax, who had a smile on his face. You subconsciously showed a bright smile. You casually carried the 2 double-edged axes on your shoulders, jumped off the landing pod, and walked firmly towards Korax. Open black lens bracket Week 6. Under the command of Korax, the armed workers successfully completed the cleanup and preparation of the entire mining star. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A large number of enemy armed vehicles and weapons have become your spoils of war. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Moreover, Comrade Aroni, codenamed Castle, has achieved a phased victory in his casting operations. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. He successfully put into operation an STC standard construction template for a laser weapon seized from a large stronghold. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As a result, the clumsy firearms in the hands of most of the armed workers were immediately replaced with simple and durable laser guns. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, Comrade Alendi, codenamed Pawn, brought you an exceptionally heavy message. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Many uprising forces on the planet's surface suffered heavy casualties. The enemy's anger at the failed attack on the mining star was almost entirely borne by them. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. If the mining star, as a base, does not provide any support to the uprising forces on the planet, then annihilation will be their only end. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You and the others fell silent. Korax, who had slightly narrowed his deep eyes, also remained silent. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A few minutes later, Korax slowly stood up and said to everyone with a solemn expression, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Although the armed workers in the base have achieved several war victories, the enemy's greed for the mineral output and numerous geographical advantages account for the majority. If they rashly enter the planet's surface to fight, the number of casualties among the revolutionary forces may far exceed everyone's imagination. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Although the Neff brothers and several representatives of the armed workers repeatedly emphasized that they were not afraid of sacrifice for the success of the revolution, and would be fearless as long as Korax gave the order, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, Korax, whose vision and thoughts were more cautious and long-term, explicitly rejected everyone's request for battle, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. He bluntly told everyone that according to the mineral data from previous years, if the mining star's mineral supply stopped, a large number of production tasks for the Tech Guild would be completely stalled, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. If the Tech Guild was willing to bleed money and reverse the flow of benefits to the hardworking people, they could persist for several years or even longer, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, the greedy Tech Guild would not share the profits with ordinary people, and would even intensify their exploitation to make up for their own losses, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In other words, time is actually on the side of the base, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As long as everyone proceeds with the preparations in an orderly manner, the enemies on the planet will soon fight among themselves over the distribution of benefits, and may even trigger another uprising revolution that sweeps the entire planet, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, this plan, which is measured in half a year or even a year, cannot be considered fair to the uprising forces that are about to be wiped out or to the many ordinary people who have suffered, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, both you and the listening crowd fell silent again, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your reason tells you that revolution requires bloodshed and sacrifice, whether it is the lives of those present or the lives of the armed workers, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As time passed, the meeting ended temporarily, and everyone dispersed with heavy hearts, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You and Korax went together to the people's cafeteria, where big pot meals were made, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You suddenly noticed that the amount of food each armed worker could receive had been reduced by more than a third, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Korax, holding only half a bowl of noodles, told you calmly, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Although the revolutionary forces have seized a large amount of food and supplies belonging to the enemy, the amount of food that can be produced on the mining star is very small, mostly grown experimentally in abandoned mine shafts, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Therefore, for the healthy development of the base and the revolutionary plan to liberate the planet, the armed workers voluntarily reduced their daily food supply, preparing in advance for the hard days to come, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You stared at the half bowl of noodles in your palm and couldn't help but sigh, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Week 7. Everything was proceeding smoothly as Korax had predicted, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The Tech Guild on the planet didn't even last half a month. Due to the issue of profit distribution, a fierce civil war broke out between several major forces, spreading across countless cities, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As a result, their encirclement and suppression of the uprising forces suddenly weakened a lot, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, judging from the news brought back by Alendi, the actual situation of the uprising forces is still not optimistic, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Originally numbering over 10,000, after experiencing life and death escapes, endless war, and even betrayal by their own personnel, they are now only left with a crippled force of about 1,500 people, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. After obtaining some intelligence, you immediately found Korax, who was thinking about the next step of the revolution plan, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, before you could ask, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Korax, with a solemn expression and a pair of deep eyes, told you an important decision, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. He intends to release atomic mining bombs in advance to destroy several important industrial cities, forcing the Tech Guild, which is caught in civil strife, to surrender completely and end the revolution. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Otherwise, not only will the Civil War cause more casualties, but the famine caused by the cessation of industrial production will also create a terrible chaos that will affect the entire planet. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Although this would be a major benefit to the development of the revolutionary forces and would attract more ordinary people to follow, if they only focus on gains and losses, then what is the difference between them and the tyrannical Tech Guild? Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You nodded slightly, agreeing with Corax's idea. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At the same time, you also lowered your head and pondered for a moment. After considering the many current difficult conditions, you made a suggestion to him. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You want to go to the planet alone to see if you can use the remaining strength of the uprising forces to launch a greater revolutionary storm, which can also be regarded as an attempt using different methods. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. If your revolution plan fails, then Corax's action of dropping atomic mining bombs can be carried out legitimately. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Moreover, the final loss will only be you in this part of the uprising force, with no damage to the core strength of the base. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Corax, with a slightly furrowed brow, stared straight at you. He was silent for a long time, and finally agreed to your request. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You immediately turned and left, looking for Comrade Aroni, the casting supervisor codenamed Castle. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You re-obtained from him a set of heavy metal armor carefully forged by the armed workers. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You obtained 2 brand new laser guns and a resharpened double-edged axe, as well as a large number of fragmentation grenades. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You obtained from Comrade Nia, codenamed Queen, 7 intact personal protection devices. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Just as you had completed all the preparations and were about to go to the gravity well. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The elusive Corax suddenly appeared in front of you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. He slowly handed you a sharp scythe and a heavy iron hammer, telling you that this was the only token of important trust to gain from the uprising forces, and also a special gift for you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Brother, no, it should be, Foreman, comrade, I wish you all the best on this trip. As revolutionary comrades, I hope your revolution plan is a complete success. As a brother, I'll wait for you to come back and eat noodles. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Corax, gazing at you, slowly revealed a bright smile, like the sun shining brightly. Close black lens bracket. Hot recommendations. Open black lens bracket. You, clad in heavy metal armor, fully armed, entered a landing pod cobbled together from various salvaged components. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A rock drill, its engine roaring, used its powerful drive to slowly hoist the completely sealed landing pod to the center of the gravity well. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You secured your towering frame with the seat's safety harness, and activated the internal communication device, signaling the operators. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The next moment, as the rotation of the mining planet aligned with its orbit around Kievar. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The landing pod, gradually enveloped and accelerated by the gravity well's invisible force field, was launched like a cannonball towards the planet's surface in an instant. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your expression contorted as you endured immense gravitational acceleration. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In a very short time, the landing pod passed through the Lagrange point, was swiftly captured by Kievar's gravitational field, and plummeted towards the thick atmosphere. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You felt the terrifying temperature inside the landing pod rise steadily, accompanied by violent jolts. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In the past, wearing power armor, you had never truly experienced the agony of mortals riding in a landing pod, especially one that was a shoddy, worker-assembled knockoff. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket just when you thought you were about to face utter destruction. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The sound of the retro thrust engines igniting from the bottom of the landing pod gave you a sense of relief. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket accompanied by a terrifying screech of twisting metal and a final, violent impact. Everything around you fell silent. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You tore off the safety harness, drenched in sweat. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You quickly grabbed the two double-bladed axes secured beside you and strapped them to your back. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The sharp scythe and heavy hammer, gifted to you by Korax himself, were placed horizontally behind your waist, and a series of fragmentation grenades were tightly bound to your body like harvested fruit. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Holding a laser rifle in each hand, you kicked open the slightly warped landing pod door without hesitation and charged outside. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You didn't encounter the enemy soldiers you had imagined. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. According to Korax's advice, the landing pod's designated drop point was an industrial city closest to the rebel group's hidden location. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. It was also one of the chaotic cities where the Tech Guild had recently experienced internal strife. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You warily surveyed your surroundings. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your keen sense of smell detected the pervasive scent of gunpowder and the burnt odor of laser scorches, along with the decaying stench of city waste and the ubiquitous smell of blood. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were standing on a damaged city street that had been completely bombarded, surrounded by countless shell craters and blackened bloodstains, with numerous mutilated corpses of civilians randomly scattered along the roadside. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You quickly found a half-collapsed wall to use as cover, and activated the simple communication device used to contact the rebel forces. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A dozen seconds later, you immediately heard several short, low-pitched beeps in your ear. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You slowly exhaled. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. That was the rebel group's response, confirming that they had received your location information and were coming to meet you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You immediately got up and began searching the unfamiliar surroundings, intending to eliminate any potential dangers for the approaching rebel forces. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You continuously checked the surrounding dilapidated buildings, expanding the scope of your search. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You gradually frowned. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were surprised to find that the living standards of ordinary people on this planet were even worse than those on the mining planet before the rebellion. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Although the miners back then worked extremely hard and lacked sufficient food. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Their morale and hygiene habits were maintained at a very high level. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Just by observing the interior environment of the damaged buildings, you could infer that the daily lives of most ordinary people were a complete mess. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Just then, you, who had been frowning, suddenly stopped in your tracks. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your keen sense of smell clearly detected a foul odor, a mixture of fresh blood and human excrement. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You slowly reduced your pace, using the stealth techniques learned from the Shadow Special Forces, and entered a nearby building that was still mostly intact. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You narrowed your eyes subconsciously. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You observed a series of messy footprints on the ground, along with signs of dragging and struggling. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You suddenly rushed forward and burst into a dimly lit room with a half-open door. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The next moment, a hint of understanding and a fleeting trace of anger seemed to flash across your impassive face. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You clearly saw the corpse of a young woman, brutally violated by multiple people, with flesh missing from her body, surrounded by countless flies, emitting a repulsive buzzing sound. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Nearby on the ground were several military-issue metal pots and bowls, and a pile of firewood that had recently been extinguished. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You retreated expressionlessly and gently closed the open door. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were about to turn and leave. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket, but out of the corner of your eye, you accidentally spotted a metal button lying in the dust at your feet. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. It was a standard issue button that only workers would use, typically sewn onto work overalls. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You bent down slightly and picked up the metal button. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You saw a crooked, blurry name on the surface of the button. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You took a deep breath and slowly stuffed the metal button into the gap in your heavy metal armor. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In the 8th week, you gradually encountered some surviving, dispirited ordinary people. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. They rummaged through the ruins, scavenging for the few remaining scraps of food and drinking some murky, foul-smelling sewage. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You never received the rebel group's response. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You had to intercept the occasional squads of mortal soldiers in the city to obtain resources and find a more sophisticated communication device. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Soon after, having forcibly seized a small vehicle, you contacted the liaison officer on the mining planet through the vehicle's secret communication channel. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You also received some bad news from Korax that you had anticipated. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The leaders of the rebel group had reached an impasse. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. One side believed that perseverance was victory, and that if they persisted, the mining planet's base would turn from defense to offense, taking advantage of the tech guild's internal strife to liberate the entire planet, and that the powerful warrior who was about to be sent down was the best proof of this. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The other side believed that the people on the mining planet were a bunch of cowards who wouldn't consider their lives, and that the best way was to take advantage of the internal strife to occupy several important factories, possessing some bargaining chips to negotiate with the tech guild. As for that unlucky guy who was sent down, it was best to let him fend for himself. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Thus, a well-received internal conflict finally erupted completely on the day you arrived. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The remaining team of just over 1,500 people split into two factions, one for the revolutionary cause, and the other for survival, and the conflict between the two sides was irreconcilable. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Until the revolution faction, with bloodshot eyes, chose to detonate their ammunition depot, perishing together with the rebel forces. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Thus, the rebel group on Kievar dramatically reached its final curtain call. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You couldn't help but sigh. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You still received 2 pieces of advice from Korax. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. First, find a hidden location and try to survive. He believed that with your skills, acquiring supplies would not be a problem, and he would also select suitable important cities as soon as possible to complete the deterrent plan, forcing the tech guild, which was mired in internal strife, to surrender. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Second, choose to start from scratch and build a revolutionary force bit by bit, but time, location, and people are not on your side. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You slowly exhaled. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your fingertips suddenly brushed against the metal button that had been in the gap in your heavy metal armor. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You told Korax without hesitation to prepare atomic mining bombs, and to choose the delivery time within a week. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Korax didn't ask you why, he just remained silent for a moment and agreed to your request. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You gently hung up the communication channel. Close black lens bracket. People, must rely on themselves. Open black lens bracket. One of your palms subconsciously gripped the still bloody double-bladed axe, muttering to yourself. Close black lens bracket. In the 9th week, you drove a small vehicle, carrying the food resources you had plundered, towards one of the gathering places for ordinary people in the city. Thanks to your tall physique and the double-bladed axe on your back, or perhaps the fragmentation grenades or laser weapons wrapped around your body. The thousands of ordinary people just stared blankly, their dull eyes fixed on you. You casually threw a large amount of food onto the ground in front of you. Loaves of bread, even those covered in dust, and rolling military canned goods completely attracted everyone's attention. There is basically no food left in this area. The freshwater resources have also been severely polluted by chemical agents flowing out of the abandoned factory. Drinking it will kill you, and even if you don't die immediately, you will suffer greatly. You blinked, expressionlessly surveying the zombie-like people. At this moment, a small number of ordinary people with some sanity left seemed to reveal deep despair in their cloudy eyes. I say, have you guys ever eaten a grok's meat in your life? The toughness of that fresh meat and the aroma of the overflowing grease are unforgettable. You grinned, suddenly changing the words that came out of your mouth. You clearly saw the mouths of everyone present twitching subconsciously, repeatedly swallowing their saliva. Have you ever eaten your fill in the past? When you worked and toiled to death for these damned slave owners, have your relatives, friends, colleagues, and relatives ever truly eaten their fill? You raised your eyes, bent down and picked up a soft loaf of bread from the ground, pinching it slightly with your fingertips. The slowly dissipating aroma of grains seemed to float throughout the entire area, firmly attracting everyone's sense of smell. I think, even bread of this quality, you haven't seen it many times, have you? You opened your eyes wide and said indifferently. The next moment, you threw the flattened bread at a young child who was walking towards you, his consciousness blurred due to extreme hunger. The dazed opponent was first stunned, and then the whole person pounced on the bread in midair like a hungry wolf. He actually snatched the entire bread into his mouth before the surrounding people could react, and he didn't give up even though he was choking and rolling his eyes. I can give you the food here, but you can't snatch it. You expressionlessly drew a double-bladed axe from your bag and slammed it heavily on the ground. In an instant, countless ordinary people who wanted to take the opportunity to grab food suddenly looked embarrassed and subconsciously stopped their steps. You can do basic arithmetic, right? You count how many people are here, and then look at how much food is on the ground. Even if each person only gets a bite, it's not enough. Moreover, even if you don't starve to death today, what about tomorrow? What about a few days later? You opened your eyes wide, scanning back and forth across the faces of the crowd whose blank expressions were gradually loosening. Moreover, when you have exhausted the visible food and drunk up the fresh water you can find, then what? Are you going to be starved to death alive? Or are you going to be eaten alive by anyone next to you? No one will come to save you. Those high and mighty slave owners will not come to save you, and even I am not. The only ones who can save you are always yourselves. You took a deep breath. You used all your strength to shout loudly at the ordinary people whose cloudy eyes seemed to be thoughtful. I can tell you a simple fact, that is, the slave owner's army is full of bread, endless military canned goods, and even the fresh water they use to wash their faces is clean and odorless. Do you think this is reasonable? Is it fair? Why? Why can they be high and mighty? They can eat their fill and dress warmly. But you may starve to death here. You can't even eat a bite of bread. You, with a smile on your lips, stared at the ordinary people whose faces subconsciously revealed anger. I won't tell you any great principles, and I won't ask you to follow me to die. I'm just asking one question: do you want to eat your fill? Do you want to eat meat? Do you want to drink a mouthful of clean fresh water? You slowly raised your arms and shouted loudly at the crowd whose atmosphere was gradually changing from dead silence to boiling. Yes, I dream of it. The young child lying on the ground, almost choked to death, suddenly raised a thin little hand and shouted at you with all his might. Even a child dares to tell the truth. Don't you men and women, old and young, want to? Are you not even as good as a child? You frowned slightly and said to the crowd with a sneer, I want to too. I want to eat meat. The next moment, a middle-aged woman who suddenly burst into tears stepped forward a few steps. She slowly walked through the silent and watchful crowd and came to you. Then, the middle-aged woman bent down and picked up a military can, clutching it tightly in her dry palm with broken fingernails. I know what you want to do, but I don't care anymore. I'll go with you. I just want to eat meat. Even if I die immediately after eating it, I still want to eat it. The middle-aged woman, with bloodshot eyes, stared at you and said through gritted teeth, Madam, you can eat something now. After you finish eating, stand behind me. You smiled slightly at the middle-aged woman and said with a gentle expression. The middle-aged woman with bloodshot eyes walked to your side. You can't you? She opened the military can as if no one else was there. A few dirty, dry fingers carefully pinched up a piece of synthetic meat, and then she stuffed it into her mouth with a satisfied expression and chewed it repeatedly. And it seemed that the middle-aged woman's leading role, or your inciting words, finally produced results. In the next second, men and women, old and young, who seemed to have more desire in their eyes, walked to you one after another. They either picked up military cans and shared them among several people, or picked up bread and distributed it to the people around them. After all, the food in front of you was exhausted. Hundreds of people had already stood beside you. But there was still a large group of ordinary people who had not received anything, staring at you with eager expressions. Don't worry. There are plenty of supplies in the armies roaming in and out of the city. Even if this city is gone, we still have the next city. We still have the entire planet. You picked up the double-bladed axe that was stuck on the ground. You scanned the surrounding ordinary people with a smile and shouted loudly. Follow me, don't starve to death. Grab bread, grab canned food. Follow me, don't starve to death. Grab steaks, grab fine wine. Grab bread, grab canned food, grab steaks, grab fine wine. The ordinary people who had just filled their empty stomachs a little, and were now even more hungry, shouted with bloodshot eyes. The remaining people who had not received food also raised their arms, joining this riot that you had deliberately stirred up with fanatical expressions. This is not a revolution, nor is it an uprising. You just gave these ordinary people who were destined to die a reason to rise up and resist. Slave owners on the planet, your hungry and thirsty worker grandfather is here. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.